Friedland, a battle part of the War of the Fourth Coalition. The date was 14th of June 1807, location Friedland, Prussia. It resulted in a decisive French victory, the Treaty of Tilsit, the end of Russian hostilities towards the French Empire, Russia integrated the continental system, and the effective end of the Fourth Coalition. It was between France and Russia. France, led by Napoleon I and Jan Lanz, while Russia was led by Levin August, Count von Bennigsen. The French had 80,000 men going into the battle, while the Russians only had 54,000. The French were left with 61,000, and none of the Russians survived. The Battle of Friedland, June 14, 1807, was a major engagement of the Napoleonic Wars between the armies of the French Empire commanded by Napoleon and the armies of the Russian Empire led by Count von Bennigsen. Napoleon and the French obtained a decisive victory that routed much of the Russian army, which retreated chaotically over the Ale River by the end of the fighting. The battlefield is located in modern-day Kaliningrad Oblast near the town of Pravdinsk, Russia. The engagement at Friedland was a strategic necessity after the Battle of Eylau earlier in 1807 had failed to yield a decisive verdict for either side. The battle began when Bennigsen noticed the seemingly isolated corps of Marshal Lanz at the town of Friedland. Bennigsen, who planned only to secure his march northward to Eylau, and never intended to risk an engagement against Napoleon's numerically superior forces. Though he had a good chance of destroying these isolated French units and ordered his entire army over the Ale River, Lanz held his ground and against determined Russian attacks until Napoleon could bring additional forces onto the field. Bennigsen could have recalled the French forces numbering about 50,000 to 60,000 men and retreated across the river before the arrival of Napoleon's entire army, but being in poor health, decided to stay at Friedland and took no measures to protect his exposed and exhausted army. By late afternoon, the French had amassed a force of 80,000 troops on the battlefield. Relying on superior numbers, Napoleon concluded that the moment had come and ordered a massive assault against the Russian left flank. The sustained French attack pushed back the Russian army and pressed them against the river behind. Unable to withstand the pressure, the Russians broke and started escaping across the Ale, where an unknown number of them died from drowning. The Russian army suffered horrific casualties at Friedland, losing over 40% of its soldiers on the battlefield. Napoleon's overwhelming victory was enough to convince the Russian political establishment that peace was necessary. Friedland effectively ended the War of the Fourth Coalition as Emperor Alexander I reluctantly entered peace negotiations with Napoleon. These discussions eventually culminated in the Treaty of Tilsit, by which Russia agreed to join the continental system against Great Britain, and by which Prussia lost almost half of its territories. The lands lost by Prussia were converted into the new kingdom of Westphalia, which was governed by Napoleon's brother Jerome. Tilsit also gave France control of the Ionian Islands, a vital and strategic entry point into the Mediterranean Sea. Some historians regard the political settlements at Tilsit as the height of Napoleon's empire because there is no longer any continental power challenging the French domination of Europe.